details, and Representative Brad Winstrup's on the Scott Sloan Show this morning to talk about it. Congressman, how are you?
I'm doing fine. Good to be with you this
morning.
Yeah,
you too. Thanks for coming on this beautiful day. So there's so much in this. Typically, what you guys do, there's 10,000 pages, and really you only need 2 or 3. But same day voter registration for. You know what? Maybe I just run through each point that I saw halfway through. Then we'll switch, and maybe what you saw, what jumps out at you. Okay. The first thing is on here is the bill would require states to offer same day voter registration for federal elections and to permit voters to make changes to their registration at the polls. And early voting 15 days ahead. Automatic voter registration if you're eligible as a citizen, and you have your information on file with state agencies like, the BMV, you're registered to vote unless you opt out of doing so. And then it also would expand vote by mail and make Election Day a federal holiday. There's a lot there. What's good and bad about that?
What I'm stuck on right now is trying to make sure this is not the boring part of your show.
You better step up, Winstrup, otherwise I'm moving on and I'm playing Def Leppard. Okay. Let's go.
There you go. First of all, the federal government exists at the behest of the states. So, that was the idea at our founding. And, the Constitution describes the rules for our elections, and especially our federal elections, and especially for our electoral college. And it's interesting they call this For the People Act, because let's start with one of the first things. It's not for the people, it's for the politicians. Mm-hmm. What people will not be able to believe that is in this bill is that what it says is, there's a 6-to-1 match. What is 6-to-1 match financially? In other words, anyone who gives you a donation under $200, the federal government will match that for your campaign.
What?
6 times what you raise. And part of that is because Democrats raise a lot of small dollars on Act Blue. And so that means any $100 donation will then become $600 to their campaign. Can you believe something like that is even?
And where do we get that money?
Well, they're taking it from. It says they're going to take it from a surcharge on corporate and higher taxpayer settlements with the federal government. I mean, you can't make this up.
Wow. And so somebody can run for office, and really, we the people would pay for pretty much anyone who gets it. How would the signature, does that affect the signature collection part? Because that's on you, right? To get the people out there and get enough signatures to get in.
You mean to get in the election itself?
Yeah,
but it's pretty easy in Ohio, for example. You just, there's a small fee and you just need 50 valid signatures. So, some states have a lot tougher. But yeah, so you can raise all this money on the taxpayers. That is unheard of, and no one should be in favor of that.
Good Lord! So I get 50 signatures in Ohio. I get on the ballot as the presidential candidate, and let's say I'm able to raise, $5,000 from family members. I get $35,000 match. Basically, $35,000 is what it turns into because it's a 6-to-1 match. And I mean, literally in any election, we have hundreds of people filing and get enough signatures, don't we? That we never hear of. Do they get the money then?
I think that might be just as you're going towards the general election.
Okay, all right.
Primary is done.
Good Lord.
I would imagine. And, you talked about getting rid of gerrymandering. It does just the opposite. It puts the state's authority to draw the lines for their state in the hands of the federal government so they can gerrymander it. Who are we kidding?
Well, that's when I saw the gerrymander, I'm like, okay, give me the details of that, because that's always one issue if you're a little wonky in politics. You don't have to be. If you look at your representatives' lines, for example, anywhere in Ohio, the maps are ridiculous, right? And pretty clearly the party in power is the one that draws the lines in order to keep that candidate, give them what many would say is an unfair advantage to hold that seat. But it's not like when we talk about as Republicans here, because typically a lot of areas are Republican, but don't think the Democrats aren't doing this. And so now the lines would be drawn, instead at the local level, be drawn at the federal level.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. And so it puts the gerrymandering in the hands of the federal government, which, they would like right now because they control the House, the Senate, and the White House. Yeah, another part in this bill is it permits agencies to investigate and consider the political and policy persuasions of an organization. So we're back to Lois Lerner. This is for the IRS. Mm-hmm. This is for the IRS before they grant a tax-exempt status. we're right back to Lois Lerner deciding who gets this based on politics. You can't make this up. It nationalizes ballot harvesting like they do in California, where you can go to door with ballots, register someone, and have them vote. And then I guess you decide which ones you turn in. I mean, it's really.
Well, I think that's an important facet of this too, Brad Wenstrup. Is this is one of the facets. This is about election security, right? And there's some security provisions in there, and a voter verified paper ballot provision mandating the use of paper ballots and things like that, which we already do. I thought, at least in Ohio, right?
Ohio does. Not everyone does. And what we saw in the last election is, the Constitution says that these election laws should come from the legislature. Must come from the legislature. And you saw secretaries of state changing the laws, using COVID as the excuse. You saw judges extending the voting for days. You saw them removing the need for a ballot signature on these things. Mm-hmm. Ohio does it right. And that's what I want to point out. And I think it's important to see what Ohio does. Ohio says you're allowed one drop box per county, and it has to be outside the Board of Elections.
Right.
So what other states have done, and we saw this in California against Mike Garcia, who's a first-generation American Air Force pilot, and he flipped a seat in California, but they put the drop boxes in the highly Democrat areas of his district. He still won anyway, God bless him. But you see the type of games that are being played.
Right. So, well, I think on that point with the drop boxes, but here's how the system works, at least in Ohio. Now, of course, Frank LaRose, our Secretary of State, he was petitioned to add more drop boxes. He said, no, we can't do that, 6 months before an election during a pandemic. We just don't, it's not like you go to Staples and buy, 8,000 mailboxes. Okay, here we go. They got to be manufactured and dropped, and then you get in areas where it's difficult to install. The prudent thing for him to do is say, no, you know what? That's a good idea. We're going to wait until after this election. We're too close. And he even said on my show, he's like, yeah, it's something we're going to look for the next election, is we'll have many more in place. It's just we can't do that in the time allotted before the election. That seems like a reasonable conclusion.
Well, the legislature, who decides or should be the ones deciding this type of thing in Ohio, and you might want to talk to Bill Seitz on this, is that one drop box per county. Mm-hmm. And that's where it is. It's at the Board of Elections, where you can also go and vote early. But we have strict regulations. Look, the whole idea is you want people to be confident in their elections, and you want to remove all suspicion of fraud. And so things matter. Look what Ohio does with the absentee ballots. They have to be in on time. The postmark has to be able to be read, which other states said you don't have to do, and you can even get them in later.
Right.
To remove suspicion, Ohio runs the absentee ballots first, and then they're done with that. Then the other votes come in from the precincts. And so you can't all of a sudden find a lot more absentee ballots after the other votes are counted. You see how that
mm-hmm.
the suspicion of fraud.
Right.
This is what Ohio has done. I think we should be proud of that. And we do have that paper trail that you're talking about. And this is not required in other states. And so no matter what the computer does, we can always go to the paper. And so these are the types of things that we're pushing for and promoting for. I'd rather the states do it. We do have a Republican bill in Congress, but even that has some questions to it as to what really relies on the states to make these changes. And that's what I'm pushing for predominantly, right, is to raise awareness, get these states to make sure they're doing it right. And if we can force some of these things on the states for election integrity, then maybe we do that. But constitutionally, there may be some challenges with that.
Congressman Brad Wenstrup on the Scott Sloan Show, 700 WOW. It's House Bill 1. It's boring but important because it has to do with messing with voting rights. Basically, that's what's going on. It's for the People Act, and there's a lot of things they want to change for upcoming elections. And you get it. Never let a crisis go to waste, right? And what happened with the last election, obviously, there's a lot of scrutiny and changes need to be made. But I am all about state. What's wrong with holding if you live in Kentucky, and I'm in Ohio, if I live in Kentucky or Indiana or anywhere else in the country, what's wrong with holding my officials responsible if I don't like the way the elections are held? Why should this fall on the federal government?
It shouldn't fall on the federal government in these cases. The federal government has, through the Constitution, has some restrictions on how federal elections are held, but they basically, in a nutshell, say that it's up to the state legislatures to decide how that will be carried out. Again, keep in mind, when this country was founded, the states were almost like their own little countries. And so they were going to try and keep their control. They wanted a United States for things that mattered. So when it comes to your statewide election, you really want that to be in the hands of the state itself as you represent at the federal level. Mm-hmm. You know, I think Wall Street Journal had a very good article just the other day. It was entitled, "Making Every Election Like 2020." And that's what they're saying, that this H.R. 1, which, by the way, H.R. 1, what does that mean? This is the Democrats' bill. It's their number one bill.
Yeah.
It is. That's why.
Well, it's like this in the 1.9 for COVID relief. It's 1.2, but this is the signature bill, right? This is what they want to be known for.
This is their signature bill. This is the most important bill to them, and it takes away from election integrity rather than making it better. But they prioritize this over the lives of the American people that are needing vaccinations, treatments, returning to school, getting back to work, all of those things. This is their number one priority. And really, when you read through these things and you're being honest with yourself, you've got to say, how does this make elections more fair? We're going to be in the same boat year after year wondering, well, was it really a truthful election? We don't know. Yeah. And so I think there's some really good points to be made. Ohio can lead the way on this throughout the country. And, you know, you didn't hear complaints about Ohio.
No, well, that's my point, right? To bring it back. Now, listen, I think you guys can walk and chew gum at the same time. If this is your signature bill, it's different than COVID. I get that because you guys do other stuff too. So, but I look at this and go, okay, well, the remedy for a problem, how does this apply to Ohio? And I go, no, we got that. Now, if you live in a state where it's jacked up, that's between you and the people you send to Washington. That's the people you send to the State House, actually, because they're the ones who draft these rules. So take it up with them. And here's the contradiction, right, is they want to, have early voting, 15 days, and establish automatic voter registration. And all you have to do, you could register the same day if you want to for a federal election and change your registration at the polls. Now, in this day and age where everything's electronic, no problem. But guess what? In the business or in the real world, you probably could do that. But the government is notorious for not being up to date. I mean, look at unemployment compensation in Kentucky and in Ohio. And there's people not getting any money in Kentucky. I saw a story last night that details people are literally tens of thousands of dollars behind on unemployment compensation. States can't even handle that. So do you trust them to handle same-day voter registration? I mean, I just wake up and go, oh, I'm going to go vote today. I'm sorry. You've got to have a little bit of wherewithal to go, hey, there's an election. I want to participate, exercise my democratic rights granted to me in the Constitution. But you got to get off your ass. It's like you want the bookmobile, the vote-mobile to show up to your house and go, okay, you ready to vote? Well, wake up. Well, we'll wait for you. Go ahead. Take your time. Have your coffee. Have your morning poop. And then come down and vote. No, it doesn't work that way. You got to at least exercise a little bit of motivation on your part in order to participate in our democracy. That's not a hard thing.
Yeah, and look, and keep in mind, this is all without regard for voter ID laws. So you don't even have to have an ID. So it really, you're going to be questioning it all the time. That's the last thing we want. It's the last thing we need as a nation. So I hope people take a good long look at this, because what sounds good for the People Act, beware. Don't judge a book by its cover, right?
Well, there's some things in here. I'm like looking at after you've served your sentence, felons can vote. You know what? I don't really have a problem with that. As long as you are keeping your nose clean, you should be able to exercise and have a say in how your government works. I mean, there's not everything in here is evil. I don't have a problem with a few of these things are like, okay, that kind of makes sense. The one that leaves me scratching my head, though, here's another one. The bill would authorize 16 and 17-year-olds to pre-register to vote in advance of them becoming true voters when they become 18. Why do we need to pre-register someone? Why don't you just go register when you're 18? What's that about?
Yeah, I don't know, unless your birthday is the day before the election or something, and that's when you age.
Well, I think maybe when you're 16 or 17, you haven't really developed, a sense of, I don't know, maybe, I guess when you're younger, you tend to probably think more emotionally, which that also means you tend to think a little bit more to the left. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? But so do you get locked into a political party when you're 16?
Well, I may be wrong, but I think you can register if you are going to be legal age on the day of the election. That you may be of the day of the next election.
Okay, I'm just not sure why we're worried about 16-year-olds, and
Yeah.
we need to get more 18-year-olds involved in the process because typically they don't show up.
Make sure they learn how to drive correctly.
Well, that's a separate bill. That's HR 2, I think, is what you guys are getting at. Brad Wenstrup, it's where the people act. So what happens next with this?
Well, I think it's going to pass the House, but I don't think it'll get through the Senate. I hope it does not.
Fair enough.
I think there'll be enough people over there that said, no, I can't do that. And, the senators represent their states, and the states should say, you know what, as you represent this state, understand this belongs to the state, not to you.
Right. Brad Wenstrup, all the best. Thanks for joining the show.
All right. Thank you so much, Scott.